Hello everyone, I'm Beppe once again, and you're listening to Araucast episode 8. I'm joined by the entire team again, Emerald and the Hermit. Good evening, guys. How you doing?
Good evening. I'm doing well. I'm excited for today's episode. I guess not as excited. I pretend some dooming, but we're going to manage. We're going to try our best.
Hello, guys. Well, I'm doing as good as usual. It's a nice evening. I'm here with two friends. It's a good day.
You're not sounding that excited.
What? It's not on purpose. Is that not how I sound always?
You're sounding a little lower energy. That's fine.
Oh, I am a little tired. That's true.
Oh, that's completely understandable. We're always recording late at night. Okay. Only something I need to comment on before starting the episode. In the past episode, there was a comment that I found really interesting. A comment on YouTube. We post both on YouTube and Odyssey. There was a comment on YouTube that I found really interesting, and then even responded to the guy and so on. But uh, one of those days, some days ago, I have noticed that the comment was not there. Not sure if YouTube has removed it or the guy himself has removed it, but it, it it was quite sad. But I just want to say to assure that I haven't done anything to it. I really wish to keep that thing there. Maybe I would even pin it, but it vanished. Sad stuff. Uh, okay. As Hermit mentioned, this will be a more black pilling episode as well. Considering that the one about South Africa was black pill enough, but today or tonight we're going to talk again about Brazil and a particular phase of our recent history, which we could call the Bolsonaro phenomenon. Maybe people watching from abroad have some idea of who the guy is and in what situation he is right now, the former president of Brazil. And you'll try to summarize his trajectory and try to bring in some comment about what we believe, where things started going wrong, and what could have been different. To start this, I was thinking about uh, when was the first time that I have heard about the guy, because he has been around for quite some time. When I was living in Brasilia, I remember my father mentioning, "Oh, I'm going to vote for this guy because he fights for the rights of the military and so on." So I have this memory, and I wonder, was that guy Bolsonaro? Because I don't remember well. But at the same time, Bolsonaro was a congressman from Rio, right? So he couldn't be making his electoral campaign in Brasilia. So probably was not him. But the first time I heard about him, that I'm sure of it, was from a teacher in a, how do you call it? After finishing middle school, I was going to some reinforcement classes in order to study for the exams public public college and so on. And there are plenty of leftist teachers and all that. And I remember this guy who is super politicized talking about this guy who mocks the Araguayan guerrilla, right? Because during the military dictatorship, military regime, there were those armed groups who were fighting the army in remote locations, and there was this particular group, the Araguaia guerrilla, which had been neutralized by the army, neutralized, I mean, killed by the army. All their combatants have been killed, and they have been buried in this random location. Nobody exactly knew where it was, no identification. So there was this entire movement after the redemocratization to find the mortal remains and so bring justice, quote unquote, to them. And Bolsonaro was a pretty, uh, how can I say? He's pretty outspoken about how that didn't matter. He came from the military, so he was very pro military regime and so on. So he was mocking, oh, it's only dogs care about the bones, something like it. He even glued a poster like this a poster with this saying something like this in his cabinet and so on in his office. So there is a certainly a lot of outrage about this, and but I think that the moment that catapulted him to the more he didn't become mainstream, but he became more famous was a situation when he was debate when he was not necessarily debating, he was uh, being hostilized by by a congresswoman named Maria do Rosario, and there was this I see this as a mask off moment for the left because they were uh, exchanging harsh words and so on, and he said something that to this day I don't really understand what he meant, but it was something like I won't rape you, his words, because you don't deserve it. And I never understood if that was a mockery of a certain movement he had in Brazil. I believe we had it in that moment, which was which there was this slogan, "I don't deserve to be raped," talking about cases of women being assaulted, and the guy justifying it by saying, "Oh, she was provoking me because of her clothes," and so on. So there was this slogan to talk about cases of sexual assault, and maybe he was mocking this, saying, "Oh, look, I respect the slogan. You don't deserve to be raped, therefore I won't do this." Or maybe he was being more gross and saying, "Oh, I'm so above you that you don't deserve even my sexual assault," or something like it. It was a he has always been very very harsh with words, very impolite, and but when saying this during that moment, he touched her in order to keep her away, but it was a really minor thing. He was almost not touching her, but he just kept her away, and she started shouting, "Oh, what is this? What is this?" Almost trying to pretend that he had hit her or something, but it was all on camera. So there was that contrast between her reaction and the actual thing. So I see he becoming more prominent at that moment because it was kind of a mask off moment for the left, for this leftist woman who was trying to take advantage of a situation by pretending it was much more than it was, if you know what I mean. So in my mind, that was the moment where people start seeing, oh, this guy is. People say a lot of bad stuff about him, but maybe most things are exaggerated because of that situation. That was super obvious that the congresswoman was faking it. When was the first time that you guys heard about the guy?
Well, back in 2013, I wasn't part of a Facebook group dedicated to political debate, and the friend who put me there, he once just told me about the guy and showed some videos of him being, clips of him being,
Very explicit.
turn playing. Yes, yes, things like that you would see 10 years ago playing "Turn Down for What" in the background or something. And well, I found him funny, and I found out about the Maria do Rosario incident. And that specific case, I think it was kind of tongue in cheek. I think people downplay his humor. He's not particularly quick witted, but I mean, the guy has a humor. This incident, by the way, reminds me of the amazing Donald Trump tweet. Uh, There are very few things in which Bolsonaro and Trump are actually similar, but their humor, I think, is one of them. But there was this tweet that Trump made like over 10 years ago, probably at this point, where he says, "Every time I speak of the haters and of my haters, I do it with great love because they cannot help the fact that they were born fucked up." You know, so it's it's stupid to think that the guy doesn't know what he's doing. in Trump's case. And I think Bolsonaro was kind of similar. So yeah, those kind of things, this sort of humor against politically correct culture, that was very tiresome by that point. People were already pretty fed up. Well, some people at least. Of course, it got much worse after the Trump election, but yes, such a thing already existed in Brazil. And although things did get much worse, um, some people, like my group of friends and stuff, were already kind of fed up. In Brazil, there's was always this association between being politically incorrect and being right wing. If you think about the associations that Bolsonaro had before his election with comedians like Léo Lins, Danilo Gentili, and things like that tried to make offensive humor as a sort of political weapon. So I think it was natural for these two things to go hand in hand. And well, another big moment for Bolsonaro was when Dilma was impeached. He dedicated his vote to Brilhante Ustra, which was a military who tortured some people in the military regime, right? Or allegedly, that is. He wrote a book. I haven't read it, but I might at some point. And I think that was the moment that actually made him more mainstream.
Well, my first contact with Bolsonaro warrants some context, and you guys have actually exposed or explained a lot of it already, but I'll try to give our audience a bigger picture, especially those who are not familiar with the Brazilian context. So, 2012 was the year of the re-election of Dilma, if I'm not mistaken, and for her second term after Lula, right? And this is a time uh, I remember very vaguely, but I do have some faint memories of it. Uh, it was still the time of infancy for the Brazilian internet, and the there was already some stuff happening, uh, but not a lot. Uh, Bear in mind, Brazil is a third world country, so a lot of the big social transformations hadn't happened yet. I mean, 2012 was not that far off from the invention of the iPhone, and there wasn't that big shift yet to smartphones in Latin America and in the third world in general. So I remember that the discussions around the election of Dilma kind of happened, in the internet, but the internet was not that big of a space yet. I remember seeing the campaign play a little out on Orkut, which was our social media at the time. It was actually only famous in places like Brazil and Turkey, which was where it originated from. But anyway, why am I talking about this? Because Dilma is crucial to this. Because uh, Dilma was a very unpopular president, let's just say that. And something that happened is that we were going to have the 2014 World Cup in Brazil. And this is a key moment because it was a time where the spotlight was on Brazil. If I remember correctly, the 2012 Olympics were on Rio too, right? And no, they were on London.
2016.
Yeah, 2016 was in Brazil. So we were going to have 2014 World Cup in Brazil and 2016 Olympics in Brazil. So this was a time where a lot of, the spotlights were on Brazil. uh, what happened is that, if we're going to host these great events, we're going to have to spend a lot of money. We're not going to get, this money for free from FIFA or whatever to build this great stadiums, the great infrastructure or whatever. So the Digma regime, which was already not that popular, had to start going to heavy debt and start investing a lot uh, on this World Cup, on promised infrastructure projects, but it was not going well. There was a lot of corruption scandals. It was a big storm in Brazilian politics. And one of the things that World Cup event brought was a event called Não Vai Ter Copa, or There Won't Be a Cup, in which there was a great mobilization of, social activists and, protest blocs and etc., to try to protest the huge spending for the World Cup, while Brazil was still an underdeveloped and third world nation, essentially. So there was a huge movement on that, and it ended up not succeeding, of course, because the World Cup did happen. But what it showed was that mass protests can lead to a voice, or at least start a discussion in a country. So Nova Intercopa, although it didn't have that mass appeal, it showed that street movements can work. And in that context, it showed that opposition to the government existed. It was that famous movement. I think it is the Warsaw Lights or something that show, hey, people actually agree with me that the government sucks. And so we had the key movement, the key moment in Brazilian politics was actually 2013, which was the great year of whatever you want to call it, the Brazilian Spring, the Brazilian Awakening, whatever, which was this movement where a lot of people took to the streets. And when I mean a lot, I mean really a lot. It was kind of like an Arab Spring moment in our politics, because a lot of corruption scandals came to light, and people were getting tired of institutional politics and looking for an alternative. And I think it is during that context, given this whole context, that Bolsonaro came to preeminence during this 2013 to 2016 era. Bear in mind that Dilma's actual impeachment happened in 2016. It started in December 2020, 2025, 2015, and went all the way to 2016, if I'm not mistaken. So it was there that was the golden age of the Bolsonaro phenomena, where he became famous in social media by this phenomenon that Emerald was talking about. And by around 2014 to 2015, it was the start of the so-called great digitalization or great digital inclusion in Brazil. Because if it was a little seed in 2012 and it grew exponentially more in 2013, it had gone to way more in 2014 and 2015. So a lot more people were in the internet at that time, and way more in 2016 and 2017. And this kind of catapulted the Bolsonaro phenomena. It was that perfect storm of mass street movements with mass dissatisfaction with the government and with institutional politics, and with the ruling parties. So there was this void which was needing to be filled by an outsider, and that's where Bolsonaro came in with the new technology, the internet, and took it by storm. So anyway, this huge context being given, where does this enter? Where do I enter in the picture? I gotta say, I have learned about Bolsonaro from memes, basically. Through scrolling Facebook, you get a quick video of Bolsonaro taking down a leftist, which, with, as Emerald said, with "Turn Down for What" music, the "Deal With It" glasses. It was the, if I'm not mistaken, the MLG era, and Bolsonaro was kind of this seen as this cool character who does this takedowns of his opponents, sort of like what Ben Shapiro was, I guess, for some time. And yeah, this is how I got into contact with his ideas, which was through the internet. And I think this is important because uh, Bolsonaro kind of showed up in the coming of this age of digital politics, something that was unheard of before because the mainstream media was very set on basically this social democrats versus socialist dilemma, and it never got out of that. So to have this huge institutional shakedown starting in 2012 and ending in his eventual rise to presidency was this great rupture in Brazilian politics.
But yeah, two things that you guys mentioned. I have to be thankful. You reminded me of a lot of stuff. Uh, yeah, Dilma was not a popular president, and she was not popular since the beginning because uh, she, she was basically the successor to Lula, right? Lula had two terms. He was elected in 2002 and 2006, and then when we reached 2010, he couldn't re-elect himself anymore. The planned successor, as far as I know, was José Dirceu, but uh, he was jailed, if I'm not mistaken, because of a corruption scandal, the mensalão. So they had to go for Dilma, and there was all that marketing effort to turn her into a more palatable person, right? Because she was not really a public figure to this point. She acted on the shadows. She was close to all those people, but she was not meant for the more forefront political stuff. But people ended up electing her, and things are hidden in the first term because Brazil was living out that optimism phase. I remember that when 2010 is the year where I entered the engineering course, the engineering university. I probably have mentioned this in a previous episode as well. There's all there was all that excitement because Brazil had found new oil reserves, and there would be that infinite money for investing in education and infrastructure and so on. And why not also have a World Cup, a soccer World Cup, and the Olympics at almost at the same time because there will be plenty of money. So there is all that excitement. And when you start reaching 2014, um, we start to realize that things are going a bit wrong, right? We're spending all that money, and maybe these new oil reserves are not that big, so things are starting to sound to look bad. So there was some growing insatisfaction growing. Up to 2013, basically, if you're a politicized person, you're a leftist. You only heard about people engaged in politics who are leftists, and I believe 2013, as Emerald mentioned, was the point that things started changing and some politically incorrect people uh, from the right started appearing. Because the cool factor was always in the left before that. And 2013 is this point where people start waking up, quote unquote. I remember going to a protest, going to the streets in 2013. I wasn't really sure of what I was doing actually, but I felt that need. Oh, I need to go because this is important. So it was that, and I believe many people felt the same way. They were not politically invested, but they were seeing the world around and thinking, oh, maybe that's an important stuff. Maybe I should be there. So many people got introduced to that more politically charged world, and many of those people who were just neutral or not very or were not very attracted to the left started realizing, oh, maybe I'm a right winger and so on. So that was really a turning point. Yeah, and Bolsonaro fits right in, right, in a moment where uh, he was around for a lot more time because he has been a congressman for uh, way more time than that. But there was a moment where he started appearing, and many people started seeing themselves represented by the guy to some extent, right? At least to this extent he did that he was pushing back some leftist narratives and so on. Many people probably didn't like it, but I won't I won't start this fight. And then when they have a representative, they started being more emboldened.
Well, I think that in 2013, those protests that happened that you mentioned, you didn't even know what the hell you were fighting for, but you still went there anyway. They had very little substance. They were not at all like an actual revolt happening. They were just a mass movement. People doing it because everybody was doing it. And there were a few people who made ideological or at least principled protests, but they were absolutely squashed by the majority. Um, Even some liberals in the not American term, or even libertarians, proto-libertarians or whatever, they tried to do their thing back in the day. Some faces that are frankly not good, like João Pinheiro. Do you know this guy, the journalist?
Yeah,
He's he's slimy to say the least, but he organized protests that were libertarian, at least in their name back in the day. And something also really interesting is that like 90% of the population was in favor of such protests, but 90% certainly wasn't in a single ideological camp. It wasn't as if 90% were against Dilma because she was left wing or because she was from the Workers' Party. So yeah, there was that, and it also came to an end very quickly. People forgot about it. It was kind of like a fever dream.
I remember people had no clear goals. There was all that talk about, oh, we don't want political parties here. We don't want to be associated to political parties. But at the same time, they had no clear goals. So it was a protest for the sake of a protest. Oh, we're unsatisfied, but there's no point.
Exactly, and no one actually that became a big nothing burger. That's my point. So it was very easy for some people to make kickstart their own things back in the day. I think a lot of what became um, the early liberal or libertarian quote unquote movement in Brazil kind of was a ramification from that. For example, and probably not only that, it's just the one that I'm the most familiar with.
Yeah, yeah. The protests themselves didn't achieve much, but I see their value in this making a lot of people have a taste of political action for the first time.
Yeah, I guess it's a phenomena. What I mean by that is that there is a kind of a cycle in Latin America and especially in third world countries of the anti-corruption protest, which really doesn't stand for a lot of things, just anti-corruption. So it inevitably gets captured by some movement or another. And the big issue for the 2013 protests is that 2014 was the year of the election. I gotta correct myself a little because I said 2012 was the year of the election, but it was
True.
actually 2014. And by the election being in 2014, a lot of people, were usually jaded in the same way. The election is next year. We're going to vote different this time, and things are going to, work well. And they didn't work out well. People just voted for the same thing, and yeah, nothing much happened. And 2014, I guess it's a very important year because it was a very close election. We don't remember it as such, but it really was. There was a sense of there was a really real possibility of Dilma losing. And if you look at the map of the 2014 election, it basically foreshadowed what Brazilian politics would be for the next, well, I hope not many years, but for the foreseeable future, at least the next 10 years, which would be this south and southeast versus north and northeast dynamic. But anyway, In 2014, the candidate who lost, which was Aécio Neves, was not a very public face. He was just there as the opposition guy. He was, as we say, part of that social democrat versus socialist things. The opposition in Brazil was the social democrats. We were ruled by the actual socialist party, which was not socialist, as an Eastern Bloc country, which was socialist as third world socialist regimes goes, like Hugo Chavez and alike. So when he lost, and I know there was a lot of people who had actual faith in the guy, or at least saw him as an actual opposition and not controlled opposition. So when the protests were going on, especially in 2015, when the whole Dima government fiasco was discovered and the GDP tanked, there's another thing that we have to add to the mix that during 2015, I don't know if 2014 also, I don't remember exactly in my memory, but 2015 for sure, that we started the great Brazilian recession or whatever you want to call it, and the economy tanked like 9 to 10%. So it was pretty bad. And general dissatisfaction with the regime was at an all-time high, and this was the year 2015 was the year the impeachment process got rolled on Dilma, and and a lot of people had that hope that Aécio was going to replace her. Of course, Aécio was not her vice president, so he didn't replace her. I do remember a video that Monarch, which was a huge popular Minecraft YouTube, for some reason, was interviewing people on the streets, and the people on the streets, when they were asked, "Who do you think is going to take over when we get rid of Dilma?" And people were saying, I ask you," not knowing it was her vice president. So it goes to show that, people are starting to get politicized, but not politicized enough to know how things work. So anyway, 2015 was I guess we could call the first huge year for Bolsonaro, which he went from basically nobody to, by the end of the year, pretty much the face of the internet, or at least the Brazilian political internet, and launched what we could call the Bolsonaro phenomena proper, which was the Bolsonaro 2018 presidente or president.
Yeah, yeah. You made me remember the 2014 election was pretty shady actually. I remember the count being updated in the last moment. Oh, this is the result. There is no progress there. So there's a lot of suspicion around it. There was a moment where people start being more suspicious. Oh, maybe there's something wrong with our electoral process. We always took a lot of pride. Oh, we have those automatic machines, automatic voting machines. Look at the US, they still use paper, but there was no way to audit this stuff. To this day, there's no way to audit the election, so at least theoretically. And people, there was a lot of uproar about it. Maybe this election has been manipulated, stolen. Who knows? And even even if I ask you, which was just an anti-workers' party force, there, I don't remember people being found of anything positive about the guy, anything particular about the guy. He was just this anti-workers' party force, and even that was enough to make the elections being pretty close.
Yeah, I was about to mention exactly that. In 2014, people already suspected of fraud. And frankly, uh, I don't even know how Dilma won because she was insanely unpopular, including among people, who are basically lefties. You know, there's no, we won't have a World Cup kind of guys. So I remember already back then feeling a little, well, I was a teenager, but I felt that something was off. And every single election from then on has, I think, the suspicion over the suspicion of fraud has become greater and greater. Personally, I think Bolsonaro was way more popular than what the results in 2018 showed, and well, 2022 was, kind of the same thing. And also in 2014, there was something very weird. For the first time, there was someone from the Liberal Institute influencing directly a candidate, which was the pastor, Pastor Everaldo. I don't know if you guys remember, but
Not at
Bernardo
all.
Santoro, yeah, he was from PSC, I think, Social Christian Party or something. And Bernardo Santoro, which is at least he used to be the head of the Liberal Institute. He worked with his team, with this candidate's team, to actually trying to have some liberal discourse in a more popular vein. It's not just something niche for nerds in college. Now they have a candidate who talks about it. But of course, it was kind of a big meme, and the guy was a boomer pastor, so it didn't really go anywhere. But still, this they tried to do this.
Yeah, and as Hermit mentioned, from 2015 onwards, Bolsonaro started going up and up. There was the there that's the when the process of him going mainstream started. I remember he going to those television programs which were popular but were fringe as well. With I don't know, he went to Luciana Jimenez, which was this former model. She even had a son with Mick Jagger, if I'm not mistaken. And going to those kind of TV shows to for sensationally situations, and he explaining his views on I don't know homosexuality and so on. There was the interview with Stephen Fry, if I'm not mistaken, with Ellen Page. All those cringe-worthy moments, but that made him, I mean, if not popular, at least well known, right? I'm not sure about the proper timeline, but that was the moment where those things started happening, right?
Exactly. As you were saying, I remembered that maybe this is interesting to mention later, but uh, this liberal influence over politics. Someone who was very invested in that was Edio Beltrão, but that's another. I think that's something else.
Together with the Bolsonaro rise, some other movements were appearing, right? As you mentioned, those liberal trends as well. When I say liberal, we mean a classical liberal, right? This more free market stuff was not that related to social values, but more, oh, we need to open the economy. Our economy is too closed and so on. There are too many taxes. So at this point, the terminology in Brazil and the US was not exactly the same, but over time started becoming like that. But at that time, liberal, we meant the free marketeers, right?
Yes, but I mentioned this because I think it's relevant because at the time that this happened, Bolsonaro was at the same party as this pastor that I mentioned. So probably the same. I mean, I don't know, probably, but it's not crazy to imagine that those policies came to him from the same sources, from uh, the Liberal Institute guy. And the Elio Beltran stuff is tangential. It's not completely unrelated, but it's something that rose at the same time with his starfish strategy of creating different institutes and, you know,
Yeah, I see. I see. That's a possibility.
Something that this reminds me of is something that we have to discuss is the transformation of Bolsonaro. What do I mean by that? If you guys don't know who he was prior to 2015, Beppe had did a good introduction, but I guess we have to paint the picture a little more for people who are unaware. We're going to go back to 1964, which was the year in which the military took power in Brazil, following suspicions of communist infiltration, and eventually led to a military regime. And it stood for a lot of years. Yeah, it was from 64 to 88, so some 24 years, if I'm not mistaken, something like that. And during that time, Brazil initially was closely aligned with the US. The coup was largely made by at least sympathetic forces to the US. It was not a strictly CIA coup. It was more of a sympathetic to American anti-communist stance more broadly. And so initially, Brazil was aligned with the US, but it so happened that during the Jimmy Carter administration, and Jimmy Carter is up there with one of the worst American presidents, the US started to kind of rein in some Latin American dictatorships because the whole peace and love stuff, which eventually led to the betrayal of South Africa, Portugal, and Rhodesian and stuff. The same happened in Latin America, and Brazil was, you know, uh, understandably pissed at the prospect of, we did a whole coup on our country, our own politicians, in order to take a more favorable stance to the U.S. But when it comes time to, actually develop our country, they are turning their backs on us. So the military gradually became less and less enthusiastic about working with the United States and started working with, the so-called unaligned bloc and a little even with, the communist world, like the Soviet Union. And during that time, there developed this ideology in South American, Latin American, and this general third world dictatorship, which was uh, kind of this sovereign ideology, sovereignist ideology, which basically means we have to defend our natural interest above all else. And it started with those military guys, if I'm not mistaken. It really started with President Medici, and where Brazil, tried to build the atom bomb. Brazil tried to secure its institution from foreign capital, trying to keep things nationalized, creating, developing its own industry. During that time, Brazilian industry actually reached its highest participation in the GDP because we didn't want to get dependent on foreign trade, etc. So that was a movement. Uh, Eventually, you guys can correct me because I don't know his years. A guy comes around after the dictatorship had ended, after the military regime had ended. A guy called Enéas Carneiro. He was a guy from a party called Prona, which was a very favorable a party very favorable to those sovereignist ideas and these national development ideas. And this guy had a huge influence, although he didn't win the election. He had a huge influence on the kind of this sphere that thinks this way, this military sovereignist mind thinkers. And so happens that a guy who was very pro-military, who was very pro-military regime, was Bolsonaro. As Beppe said, Bolsonaro was basically the guy who was just there to defend the interest of people who served in the military and now wanted their pensions, basically. But he heard that guy talking stuff on the TV or radio or newspapers, whatever it was at that time, and he actually bought into these sovereignist ideas. I think he even admired the late sovereignist military presidents. So before 2015, he was a very military focused sovereignist guy. He didn't want to be a big old American liberal. He was just Brazil first, and develop an atom bomb, develop uh, issues that protect Brazilian sovereignty and interests. It so happened that during the Brazilian crisis, we could call, from 2012 to 2016, I don't know what happened. Maybe you guys can chime in, but what I think happened is that the faith in the Brazilian government or the project of national development kind of took a hit, and Bolsonaro was gradually transformed uh, by from a pro, I guess you could call, pro state, pro intervention, and pro isolation framework into a free market, libertarian, and uh, being a market and finance guy. And you can see that because uh, during, you could say, 2010 to 2012, I don't remember exactly what he was doing back there, but he was pretty solidly on the military sovereignist camp. And over time, because people were saying, no, our economy is too closed, we're too dependent on national companies like our national petroleum company, there is this huge corruption in the public sector, we want less taxes, we want to be aligned with the United States and Europe and whatever. And Bolsonaro was gradually becoming more of a free market guy. It got to the point that by 2018, most liberal institutes were pro Bolsonaro, and Bolsonaro was friends with many of them. Like you guys mentioned, like Emerald mentioned, and Bolsonaro was friends with Hélio Beltrão, Bolsonaro was friends with MBL, Bolsonaro was friends with a lot of these liberal guys. So there was a transformation there. I'm curious to what do you guys see on this process? What caused it? Who were the main influence? What changed his mind?
Yeah, that's a really important point. The the mentality, this sovereignist mentality, Brazil. Yeah, it probably has started with President Medici, but mostly with his successor, right, Ernesto Geisel, who was responsible for creating a lot of state companies and so on, who are still running to this day. People, people blame always the communists for state control of stuff, but the military in the later part of the military regime were responsible for a lot of it. And that's impressive to think that Brazil at some point had its own brands of cars and even computers. There's a great video by the Asianometry channel talking about the Brazilian computers, what they were able to produce here. But as always, they always they felt behind. It was impressive, but at the same time, it was not very feasible because we were falling behind in development and so on. So and uh, it's important to mention Aeneas as well as a successor to those ideas. And to his credit, he was somewhat impressive as a person. He looked a bit crazy, he sounded a bit crazy, but he was well spoken. He was an educated man, differently from Bolsonaro, who is not a very smart cookie, right? But he's outspoken, so he has some charisma because of this. And this transformation, you can even make a parallel between Bolsonaro's transformation and Lula's transformation, because Lula was there after the redemocratization. He was running for presidents almost since the beginning, and he was just losing elections. He was losing to Collor. He was losing to Fernando Henrique Cardoso, because he brought this more communist style to the table. Right? It was more like uh, workers' party guys and more like a unionist, being more explicit about those left-wing ideas. And the moment when he was able to actually capture enough good part of the electorate and win an election, was when he went through some change of looks. Right, that I remember there was though that open letter to the Brazilian people when he was saying, "Oh, look, I don't plan to nationalize economy and so on." He started using a suit, and his words changed. There's a lot of marketing going on to make him more palatable. So that was a moment when he was able to win an election in 2002. And Bolsonaro somehow went through a similar process. because as you said, he was this very sovereignist guy, drawing from the ideas of Enéas Carneiro. He even kept some of them regarding our natural resources. Oh, there's graphene, there's niobium, with a mineral that Brazil has the most reserves in the world. He kept some of that stuff, but he was also going to this process of being more palatable. I see there was the uh, since 2015 there was the formation, or 2014 there was the creation of this big tent coalition, right? There was many, all those anti-workers party forces who are not enough to elect themselves, but together they were able to make this anti-left front. As you mentioned, there was the sovereignists like Bolsonaro. There was the classical liberal, the free marketeers. I can also include the military, the religious right, which is not a single thing. You have the evangelical religious right. You have a certain revival of the Catholic right, and the legalists as well. We cannot forget that during this process there are also the all the judicial process that led to the imprisonment of Lula because of the corruption scandal, and so on. And in this movement, there was the figure of the judge Sergio Moro, who was also some kind of national hero because, oh, he was able to to jail Lula. He stand up to the guy and was able to do justice. So he went in this package as well. So there was the joining of all those anti-leftist forces in this anti-left coalition, in this big tent coalition. But in order for it to work, they had to make compromises, right? So they put this veneer of a more economic literacy on Bolsonaro because, oh, look, those ideas are outdated. People lost faith on this. We need to remember that there were two national development programs in the former in Lula's terms and in Dilma's terms that kind of failed. So people are losing faith in this. So, oh, we need to be more free marketeers. Bolsonaro don't necessarily believe that, but we will make it happen. We will put this veneer of free market on him. We will make him work together with Sergio Moro during his electoral campaign. So there is the formation of this mass anti-left movement, right? Not sure if you see it the same way, but I see this. That was the point of the formation of this big tent coalition.
Absolutely. And you can see that one of the biggest struggles, the biggest infighting in the Bolsonaro um, presidency was between the legalists, which were the Sergio Moro types, who only cared about, corruption, 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 not really understanding that the same mechanism could be used against them, the same legal mechanism that is, and the more military types, which were, the boomer kind of, the boomer right.
And you have to remember before I forget, anti-corruption has always been a thing, right? Jânio Quadros, president in the 50s, was anti-corruption. The Workers' Party started in the 90s as an anti-corruption force. Oh, we need to purify Brazilian politics. There was always this trend. So it actually means nothing, right?
Yeah, but the one thing that doesn't fit really was frankly liberal tendencies of some parts of his government, which are represented the most by his Minister of the Economy, right, Paulo Guedes, which is a pretty radical guy, particularly for Brazilian standards, and he actually could do a few things. Um, so that was kind of weird, and Bolsonaro seemed to be very loyal to him, and that really surprised me at the time. I would expect him to be the first one to be kicked out, but that was not the case at all. It was really weird. So that's why I mentioned, and I talked about the possible influences of the Liberal Institute on on Bolsonaro, even if through his party, just social Christian party, because that is very weird. It kind of comes out of the blue if you think about it. Bolsonaro was very statist and very interventionist for most of his career, but he seemed to be loyal to this ideology that was free market friendly.
You guys compared him to Trump uh, in the beginning, and I believe maybe they have this similarity as well. Because I see some people talk about Trump saying that he his position reflects who is closer to his ear at the time. So maybe Bolsonaro is like that. He can be influenced pretty quickly if you're able to get close to him and explain things to him. I'm not saying it's not insincere, but maybe he was able to respect people who were more intelligent. So and as Paulo Guedes was more loyal to him, but I mean he seemed like a guy with less ego than the average Bolsonaro follower. So maybe he was able to talk him into accept that stuff. Because when you look at the other side, the legalists who went into conflict with Bolsonaro pretty quickly, there was a more there was there we had a much more ego problem, right?
Yeah, the way I see it, I don't know if you guys are going to agree with me, is that Bolsonaro really bought in. Maybe not he was intellectually convinced of it, but I guess he was feeling the vibes. What I mean by that is, by the time Bolsonaro was elected, which was 2018, America 2016 had already happened. So, Trump was already riding the wave of populist candidacies that was happening at that time. And there was, if you guys remember, and as Brazilian mainstream discussions are a bit of a downstream of what happens in Europe and especially in America, it was the time of the big conservative pushback. It was the time of Ben Shapiro's, the times of the other guys. I'm sorry that I don't know that many of them. Steve Crowder, I guess. Uh, but I think Bolsonaro was riding the wave. I think he really bought into to the whole Reagan, Thatcher, and neoliberal ideology. And people throw around neoliberal all the time, but Thatcher and Reagan are the clear neoliberal guys, and he really bought into that. And it was a time in which these things were not under scrutiny yet. We enlightened Zoomers in 2026 laugh at liberal conservatives all the time, but during 2015, 2016, liberal conservative was all the rage. Zionism was all the rage, and Bolsonaro really rode that wave, and I think he sincerely, although not intellectually convinced, he probably got at least converted in some way to this ideology. He bought into American exceptionalism, and it was a time in which it was still believable. We were still living in the shadow of American defeating the Soviet Union, America, the big war on drugs, the war on ISIS, the war on on Islam, not Islam, like radical Islam and etc. So I think he sincerely became a unapologetically pro-American at that time, and one of the big parallels we can draw today is probably Milei, although Milei is probably a little more nuts than Bolsonaro, if you guys can believe it, but he probably is. As much as we can talk shit about Bolsonaro, he was not, at least not that big of a public fan of the U.S. as Milei was. Bolsonaro still is, but I guess he became a little more jaded over the years because America is not the one figure. It's not just Trump running the show like some people believe China or Russia no, both America and Russia have their underworkings, which makes their country not that direct. But America is not Trump, and when that America, which was not Trump, worked to undermine Bolsonaro, I guess he got a little jaded. I don't know how jaded he got. I think he's still very much a believer, but I don't think he's at the level of a Malay. But I think we're approaching the 2018 actual election of Bolsonaro, and that's probably something we have to get into because it was a huge social phenomena, and something I think we are not going to see ever again in our lives. I mean, I don't know. We're still relatively young, I guess, but it was really one of a kind stuff, and I can remember it quite vividly because it was the first time I actually went to a street demonstration. I'm the youngest in this group, and when it was 2018, it was the first time I went to a demonstration, which was a pro Bolsonaro rally, and it stuck with because I haven't gone to one since because I have become very jaded with Brazilian politics, but it was a truly a time of hope. What do you guys feel about 2018?
Yeah, it was truly hopeful. I remember how happy my father was because he's from the military. He was from the military as well. So seeing his guy winning was pretty amazing. I mean, it's I mean that's not a happy thing, but to some extent, going a bit more to the future, uh, there's some kind of relief the fact that he wasn't here to see Bolsonaro losing in 2022. He died in the in May 2022, so he wasn't able to see the election. So there was some relief on my part of maybe that God spared him the that bad moment, seeing that stuff falling apart. But yeah, and I agree with you that at least in his guts, he had a gut feeling of trusting this new uh, liberal free marketeer approach, this new liberal approach, and and that's the only thing you can say about him. It was a gut feeling because intellectually, as I said, I don't give him credit at all. At least Milei has his own ideas, but when it comes to Bolsonaro, it was almost a meme, right? Every time he was asked about the economy, he was just saying, "Oh, I'll leave this to Paulo Guedes. He's the guy who will take care of this." So, and we cannot forget to mention as well in this big tent coalition, all those processes that were happening, the figure of Olavo de Carvalho, right, was one of the OGs, one of the anti-communist, anti-workers party OGs. The guy was almost talking alone in 2010 against when people were all happy, almost talking alone against those guys. He was this fringe dude who talk about fetus cells in Pepsi and so on. And over time, he started gaining more prominence. People realized, oh, maybe he's right about certain stuff because the Workers' Party plan was unraveling. So, oh, maybe, oh, he can predict the future. Maybe he was really smart. And there was an approximation between these anti-Workers' Party forces from Bolsonaro and so on to Olavo as well. So he was also a very important figure in this Big Tent coalition. He brought the more intellectual side.
Oh yeah, I don't know how we could forget Olavo in all this,
Yeah, I was shocked.
because he was, yes, he was talking about Bolsonaro way before any of us, right? He was his biggest supporter from the start, and they even actually offered him the
A position in the education ministry, right?
exactly, and he refused it.
Yeah.
He made his suggestion of his students, but his students didn't end up keeping their jobs. They were fired or something. So even though people like Benjamin, I don't know how to say his last name, Teitelbaum, uh, who wrote a book on Dugan, Bannon, and Olavo. Even though he would say that Olavo had a lot of influence in the Brazilian government, all the people that were directly connected to him ended up, not having their jobs. So in practice, Olavo didn't have a lot of influence over Bolsonaro's um, government.
I think the foreign minister, foreign relations minister, was his student as well, right? And he was there to the end. Ernesto Araújo.
Oh, was he?
I think so.
Oh, then yeah, I stand corrected. But still, that was way less than people tend to think. Olavo was not this guru that people were portraying him to be.
Yeah, people love to simplify this stuff, right? Oh, it's like Steve Bannon and Trump as well. People didn't understand the time that Trump is uncontrollable.
Yes, and Bannon was kind of trolling too, with these false clues that would lead him to Trump, that would lead people to connect him to Trump, but at the end of the day, they were kind of meaningless.
Yeah, this whole thing kind of meshes in a kind of messy, blushy blob of anti establishment rhetoric. What I mean by that is by all this process we are talking about, from 2014 opposition to the World Cup to 2015 anti-corruption protest to 2016 impeachment of Dilma to 2017 more anti-corruption things and liberal parties and movements gaining prominence. They all kind of jumbled together in some kind of incoherent mass, to which we had people using slogans. You know, when people went to these big demonstrations, especially in 2018, which was the year of campaigns for presidency and whatnot, people used to take these banners, and the most common things that would be written was "Olavo tem razão." Bolsonaro presidente and something in praise of Lava Jato, which was the anti-corruption Operation Car Wash. So all of these things molded together in the same guy, Bolsonaro, who didn't exactly represent perfectly any of them, except maybe the one which was his own name there, I guess. Uh, uh, and it all sort of blended in. So you had this liberal aspect to Bolsonaro, but he was not actually liberal. He left the things to his finance minister, and he went to do his other things, which was I think we're going to get into the Bolsonaro presidency proper, which was he didn't actually manage to accomplish that much, which is sad to say. On the other hand, you had this, pro Olavo movement. People used to go to rallies carrying Olavo tem razão, Olavo is right banners, pro Olavo banners, but most people didn't actually listen to him. They went by the vibes because he was anti workers party, and he's on our side. He's an intellectual, so we support him. You had people who supported at the same time Bolsonaro, Olavo, and MBL, and it was just a jumbled mess. And MBL supported Bolsonaro, but later broke on with him, which again we're going to get into with the Bolsonaro presidency. So yeah, I think we should get into it now. The Bolsonaro presidency. The early years were actually quite good. He actually managed to start doing some things. I guess it's the same thing with most presidency. The first few years are the honeymoon period in which you see stuff getting done. Eventually, people become jaded. They see the inner workings of power, and people are repulsed by power, and etc. And there was two big setbacks for Bolsonaro, which were largely out of his control. Some of his downfall, or most of his downfall, we could say, were in his control, but outside of his control, in the sense that it was not in his mind. Or I'm not saying that he was stupid. I probably just just saying that he was either too blind or too proud to not listen to people who are more, intelligent on power matters than him, or he was just very stubborn. Which my mind is on the latter because he was a very stubborn guy. But anyway, the two things that happened that set him back was Trump losing the election and the COVID pandemic. Both things hurt his ability to continue in power because there was this whole huge global narrative against COVID, and especially against Bolsonaro, because he was seen as a anti-vax guy, although he was clearly not. That was the global agenda being pushed around. It's not that he was not anti. It's not that he was anti-vax. It's just that he was not pro-vax enough. That happened to a lot of people during COVID. Anyway, COVID, fun topics, I guess. The other thing was Joe Biden winning in the election, the American election, and given that Trump was his big international support basis, it was also kind of a blow. It reinvigorated the Democratic Party, which was quickly used to fuel anti-Bolsonaro narratives in Brazil. Uh, Another big setback was the whole narrative speaking about democratic and EU push narratives, the great Amazon fiasco in which European countries mainly and a lot of the Democratic Party too pushed the narrative that Brazil was burning the Amazon and all the rainforest and etc. and Bolsonaro was to blame for it. So that was another blow to his public perception. So I guess asking you guys, how are we feeling about the Bolsonaro presidency? Uh, was there a good period, or when did it start falling off? What was the biggest culprits for his eventual downfall?
Well, one thing that I have learned, even in my personal life, is that many people who seem to love you, to like you, they don't really like you. They like what they believe you can become. They see some, oh, this guy can be like that. He can have this potential. So I like him because of this. He likes the what they project, the ideas they project into onto you. And when you don't correspond to these expectations, uh, they become extremely offended. I have experienced it sometimes, and I see that happening with Bolsonaro because the problem with big tent coalitions, as always, as the big tent coalition that took him to power, is that at some point they unravel. At some point, those differences, those divergent worldviews, they will appear. Fights will happen. So as you said, people had this expectation. Oh, Bolsonaro is a free marketeer. Oh, Bolsonaro is actually an olavist. Bolsonaro is a I talked about the religious right, the support from religious right. There's all that ambiguity. Oh, he is a like an evangelical, a Zionist, a pro-Israel evangelical. Other people think no, he's Catholic, and so on. Oh, but her spouse is evangelical. So there's all that ambiguity that people were sweeping under the rug before the election, but after that, uh, those things simply explode, right? And as you said, the his term was very harmed by events outside of his control, like COVID and the American elections and all the that international uproar about the Amazon and so on. I even remember answering. I think it was an American woman on Twitter at the time that she was saying, "Oh, those fumes in the city I have seen, they're coming from the Amazon." I was saying the Amazon is 3,000 kilometers away. That's not possible. That's the but look at this map of all the deforestation and so on. Yeah, but that's the Mata Atlântica. That's the Atlantic rainforest. That's not the Amazon. So okay, I see. So people were really confused about what was happening here. But even if those external events uh, hadn't happened, I it was possible to see the cracks in the coalition pretty quickly after the election. The honeymoon was really short because he started getting in conflict with the legalist side. The the Olavists and the military were also fighting each other because the military are more pragmatic, and the Olavists were saying, no, we have to be hardcore against the lefties and so on. You cannot be conciliatory. So there's all that those fights going on before the COVID crisis, which I think was the biggest blow to his reputation, because that was the point that even his some of his ministers started challenging him. The health minister went on this media tour, basically antagonizing Bolsonaro about the vaccines and so on. There was as I said, you guys have mentioned that one one common trait of Bolsonaro and Trump is that they both like to joke around, but it's a different kind of humor. Bolsonaro is more an uncle style, right? As you said, big uncle style. That guy who is outspoken, he says brash things and so on. And Trump's more quick-witted, even though he can be brash at times. He has more elaborate jokes, and Bolsonaro talks like an old uncle. It's an old uncle who served the military. I mean, it was pretty natural for me to listen to him talking about things because he sounds like one of my father's friends or something. So there's that episode when he was criticizing Pfizer, the lack of accountability. Imagine if you take those vaccines from Pfizer and people become alligators by being inoculated by this. Who's to blame? Are we able to prosecute these guys, or there's no accountability? And people spun it in a way that, he's saying people become alligators, we took the vaccine, he's anti-vax, and so on. It was this pretty hysterical moment that shows how much people are against him. That was the moment. I forgot to mention that there was all those anti-establishment forces, and that was the time of the anti-mainstream media, right? The apex of the anti-mainstream media thing, and those episodes like that fueled that rage, that opposition to traditional communication channels, right? It was a moment that people started having more channels on the internet, giving opinions and so on, and, and started a trend that uh, remains to this day. But maybe all those cracks in the coalition were manageable, but we won't be able to see it because COVID came in and ruined a lot of stuff. To me, it was a very black peeling moment. I think I mentioned this in a previous episode. Many people who I believed were more pro liberty and so on started explicitly advocating for using force to lock people up or restrict people's movement and all that stuff. Maybe it was due to fear. I don't know what happened, but it was a pretty black peeling episode. That was the time I realized, okay, all that libertarian stuff. Okay, you can remain a libertarian intellectually, but be very aware. You always be a minority. You have to live on survival mode. Take all the all the weapons you can get to defend yourself, and stop thinking that everybody there will be convinced by ideas.
Well, I agree that COVID was the big black pill for pretty much everyone, but I think that when you look back, I didn't think it would I don't think anyone actually imagined it would drag on for so long, right? So even in 2022, when the elections were coming around again, people were still talking about it. It wasn't even that people were saying Bolsonaro was right to some degree. No, the ads, the political ads on TV were all focused on how much of a genocide he was making and things like that. Um,
Manipulation of language is super strong during that time.
exactly. And I think that what Bolsonaro really did not understand, and probably still doesn't understand, is that his enemies are not playing a fair game. They're not playing between the four lines, as we say here. That is the football field lines. They are not. Uh, it's not a fair fight. So whenever he tries to appeal to this, oh, but I was right. Oh, but I'm doing the right thing. Oh, but I'm the most moral here.
I'm
It
playing by the
doesn't
rules.
matter. Exactly. It really doesn't matter. And that I think was his downfall because it's kind of funny that even though 2018 was the height of the Bolsonaro movement, it was also the beginning of the end.
And there are also the problem of this generation, let's say, of I forgot who used that term, but of weak strong men. Bolsonaro have a lot of episodes where when he says something brash about the Supreme Court or someone else, and people start questioning him, and he backs down. Oh no no no! I respect institutions and so on. He goes to a political demonstration, and people say he calls people to this political demonstration. Oh, we need to do this and that. People go there and say, look, I support you, Bolsonaro. Do this, do that. And when people start questioning, okay, are you going to do something? No, no, you cannot do this. It was those recurrent frustration moments where he tries to appear strong, but at the same time he backs down. Many of his supporters were like that as well. I remember that guy who ripped apart a street sign, which uh, was celebrating a leftist congresswoman who had been shot by, I don't really know by whom, but drug traffickers, who knows. And there was all that movement. Oh, it actually was Bolsonaro uh, told ordered people to kill her or something, that but nobody knew her at the time before that, so there was all the manipulation. But people were making those, were celebrating her memory to some extent, and there was this street was named after her, and the guy went there and ripped apart the the street sign. But when he faced the backlash, uh, he started acting like how can I say this without swearing? He was just crying about it, right? No, don't put me on jail, and so on. So there was this generation of weak strongmen who keep making, uh, creating evidence against themselves, but are not strong enough to back their words up. It was this ambiguity would destroy the entire thing.
Yes, and you would never think this would happen if you saw how popular he was in 2018.
And how outspoken he was earlier.
Yes, his enemies were in jail. He had the popular support. He didn't have the courage to actually go through with uh, and get over the bureaucracy and all the do what a strong man would do. I mean, that's what you set out on doing. Then do it. Then I think Yarvin once mentioned that politicians in the 21st century they go down to the Rubicon to fish. So you're not crossing it? What are you doing?
And I guess we're getting to the black pill of the episode now, I guess. But yeah, the Bolsonaro phenomena, if anything, is going to be marked by a huge sense of uh, disappointment and frustration, because as you guys have laid out, and I guess that's the main grievance the right has with Bolsonaro. It's not the grievance the left has with Bolsonaro, because they have bought into the whole mainstream narrative that he was a monster, that he wanted to persecute them, that he was a genocidal maniac, that he was a military dictator, that he was a fascist, and all the leftist nonsense, which is basically universal at this point. The great thing about Bolsonaro is that he, unfortunately for the right, he we wish, or they wish, that he was 1% of what his enemies claim that he was. Because for all of his talk, as you guys mentioned, of, being this brash military guy that, I don't care about the communists, we're going to throw communists out of helicopter style, we're the new Pinochet, or whatever. He didn't actually go around to, getting many communists kicked out. Instead, he tried to befriend them. And this is what Emerald talked about in the four lines analogy, because this was an analogy. I don't know if Bolsonaro created it, but he certainly popularized it, this idea that he was going to play nice, because people were constantly accusing him of being a fascist, being authoritarian, and wanted to bring the military dictatorship back. And he always was on the defensive. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to play the democratic game fairly. But as you guys pointed out, his enemies were not so keen on that, and maybe they didn't do anything strictly illegal based on the Brazilian constitution or legal system or whatnot is not being discussed here. What happened is that they played in a game which was not inside Bolsonaro's framework. So he couldn't comprehend what they were doing. He was punching shadows for most of his presidency. The left kept throwing bullshit at him. Oh, he's burning down the forest. He was not burning down the forest, but he kept fighting the narrative. No, Bolsonaro is a fascist. No, I'm not a fascist. So he kept trying to fight the narrative. No, Bolsonaro is a genocidal maniac who doesn't like vaccines. No, Bolsonaro actually bought vaccines, but he kept trying to fight the narrative. The great issue is he let the narrative be controlled by his enemies. And this is due to, a lot of institutional issues, which he never, quite addressed. He let basically the mainstream media run wild with him in the main news outlets, and mostly didn't do nothing. Oh, I'm going to cut a little bit of federal funding from you as a uh, uh, for doing this to me, but he never actually made something substantial. He never closed office. He never knocked on doors. He never sent anyone to jail. If he was a bit as authoritarian as his enemies claimed he was, he wouldn't be in jail today. He wouldn't have lost. So that's the great irony of not doing anything your enemies are accusing you of being. So you're not being what will defeat them. You're just playing their game, and at that point you're not that different from all the previous social democratic opposition guys we have had since '88.
There are two psychological reasons I speculate about for to explain what happened. One of them, which seemed more obvious to me, is that look at this guy. He was this fringe congressman who suddenly became president, and he started experiencing all the good stuff that a president has, right? He was traveling internationally. He was living in a good house. He he ate whatever he wanted. He had all the people, a lot of people praising him and so on. I get the impression that simply softened him up. He was just, oh, I can stay here and live a good life and be praised and be loved and so on. Why pick fights? I would just befriend everybody and be the president, and that's so nice. I can do whatever I want. I can have all that fancy stuff. To me, it seems pretty clear that he all the all the luxury, this more luxurious life, softened him up pretty substantially. But the other thing that I've seen people mentioning a little while ago, and really made me think, yeah, never thought about it. A little before the election, he suffered this assassination attempt. The guy uh, put a knife in his belly, and the dude almost died. I remember I had a colleague at the university who was, I mean, she had to hit herself because of that, but she was a Bolsonaro supporter, and she was pretty desperate. Man, they killed my president. She was really desperate about it, and there was a this very tense moment. He went to a lot of many surgeries because of this, and maybe psychologically you cannot discard the possibility that this shook him up as well. He started fearing for his life. Okay, I cannot be too far, or people will just kill me. Maybe he's suffering from this kind of stuff as well. So we can even say that the guy who tried to kill him actually killed him. He killed him politically.
I was just gonna mention that this is something else that completely forgot to mention. They literally tried to kill him.
Yeah, that's true. And maybe he didn't react the same way Trump reacted, because it helped on his election, but maybe he internally was suffering from it. And Trump seemed like he became even angrier by that when people tried to shoot him.
Yes, he yelled, "Fight, fight, fight!" Right?
Yeah,
But there's something else too. Trump is a WWE Hall of Famer. I think that's important to remember too.
that's true.
So he knows how to deal with these things. He was a media personality. Bolsonaro wasn't.
Yeah, and to be fair, the shot simply grazed his ear. It didn't enter his belly, right?
That's true. Yeah, Bolsonaro was much closer to dying.
Yeah, it's easier to be courageous in that situation. Not that not that he don't deserve credit for it. But okay. But regardless of his motivations for changing his tone, the fact is that he didn't do what he had to do, and he was warned. Olavo said this countless times. Democracy cannot be restored by democratic means. That's obvious. If you don't persecute your enemies, if you don't take the correct measures against them, you end up depending on their charity. You end up depending on their goodwill, and that's exactly what happened. After all the things that happened, after the all the speculation about a coup at the end of his term, which never materialized, but at the same time he created the conditions for me to be accused of this, right? Because as far as I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, people inside his cabinet proposed to him to take action and do some kind of political maneuver in order to obstruct the elections and so on, as there was some suspicions of fraud again, and he didn't want to do this, but at the same time he kept those people in his cabinet. So nothing happens, but at the same time he this ambiguity again may gives people some excuse to charge him with those accusations of trying a coup, because he couldn't decide between not having it and expelling the people those people, or embracing the plan and going forward. He was taking a bath at the Rubicon, right? He was dipping his toes at the Rubicon. This ambiguity given an opportunity to for his enemies to charge him with anything.
Yeah, and I think there's a much stronger analogy than just fishing at the Rubicon. If we look at his psychological state, and I think you are spot on his idea that he was very demoralized after the knifing. I don't quite buy your idea that luxury got to him, because I think he remained an overall simple guy, but do think you're right in the point that status got to him, or at least, living the big life. Because, as you said, he was a small congressman, but then he became a big dog. He became the president. I don't think the actual, luxury of, having a president's life got to him. If I remember, he continued to eat like in simple places, even though, even after becoming president. But anyway, living the life of, talking to Putin, he liked Putin, talking to Trump, he liked Trump, and etc. uh, he actually liked that stuff and wanted to keep going with that stuff. But the knifing and stuff eventually started getting into his head, and the whole nasty game of politics probably took a very deep psychological toll on him. Because if his life was just international politics with people he liked, like Putin, Viktor Orban, or Trump, his life would be heaven. if he could just deal with these three all day, it would be the dream presidency of his life. But internally, it was a nightmare because his whole cabinet was against him, the media was against him, the oppositional parties were all after his head because, no more outsiders, this experiment has gone rogue, we need to take institutional control back, and etc. And foreign influence from the EU, from the Democrats, and trying to juggle COVID, trying to juggle everything, took a heavy toll on his mental. And at the same time, you take a guy like Bolsonaro who is heavily demoralized, although he can still seem as brazen in his speeches. You can see he's demoralized because he's not no longer taking executive action. He's not, banging on the doors of nobody. He's not putting anybody in jail. He's basically not governing for the best part of his later years. And on to contrast that, you had a very fanatical power base. Not everybody who supported Bolsonaro was fanatical, but he did have a fanatical power base and a lot of loyal supporters, even within his loyal circle, however small that may be. And going all back to what I start talking and what you guys are talking, what I'm saying about the Rubicon is not that the analogy isn't correct, but I think the correct analogy is Bolsonaro was kind of the leper king, and not to put a bad spin on Baldwin the Fourth, which was one of the greatest kings ever, but Bolsonaro was kind of a leper king in the sense that he was completely demoralized, he was incapable of any action, and the people themselves and their most loyal supporters, his most fanatical supporters, were taking him on their shoulders or whatever with their hands to the banks of the Rubicon himself and say, no, go, just take one step, one single step, and we'll do the rest. And Bolsonaro was like, no, take me back to my home. I want to phone Putin. I want to phone Trump. I don't want to be here. I want my old life back. But no, he couldn't have his whole life back. The moment of action was there. People took him to the finish line. He didn't want to cross it. He didn't want to see what lies beyond the Rubicon, or didn't want to take the genie out of the bottle, or whatever you think it was going to happen if he actually went through with the things that he needed to do. So I think that's a very more complete picture, and frankly a much more sad and depressing picture, because it's not that he was alone. He had a fanatical loyal base who would do anything for him, who took him to the finish line, but he actually didn't want to cross it. He wanted to go back to living a normal life. In some way, I think he wanted to lose the election because he wouldn't. I don't think he could have taken it any longer psychologically. He probably would have abdicated or midterm or something like that. But yeah, I think he wanted to go back to his normal life, but really couldn't anymore. And all of his sayings that he was going to give out his blood for Brazil turned out to be empty because he didn't shed a single drop of blood for Brazil. And most of what he did was trying to beg his enemies for mercy, uh, while not trusting the people who actually cared for him.
Yeah. And the thing is, you can go back to your house, but after you do your job, right? Like Cincinnatus becomes dictator, wins the war, goes back to his farm. But he didn't want to do the job that will ensure that he could go back to his house. And it's crazy to think how little things changed to certain people, right? He still has those supporters, even a very smaller group, but there are still people delusional about it, thinking that Bolsonaro make a comeback and so on. It's a sad sight. We're living a comically tragical period where we see this humiliating stuff happen to him, and people are still being delusional about a comeback. And he himself wasn't able to learn that stuff. His sons who were very uh, outspoken during his term, and after they somehow try to help him, but they do this in a very incompetent way. To some extent, the Bolsonaro movement is still stuck in the imagine if the roles were reversed thing that killed mainstream conservatism in the US. They still looking, oh, look how the evil things left were doing to him. Can't you feel some sympathy? They still don't understand. They still repeating the same stuff over and over, expecting someone to be convinced. And even most of his supporters are getting fed up. They don't care anymore. I see very little people caring about his current state, and the dude is basically dying. His health is has gone downhill. He's locked in jail, going in and out of doctor appointments, and many people simply do not care because they got fed up. They got tired of all this. Uh, it's almost oppression based politics. Oh, look what they're doing to me. He doesn't even talk anything anymore. It's just his sons saying, "Oh, look what they're doing to my father," and they can't do anything.
Yeah, they're still in the mindset of trying to appeal to a common morality which doesn't exist. The left wants to see him cry. The left wants to see him broken. The left wants to see him weak, demoralized, humiliated. These are all things they want to see happen to him. And he's still on the mindset of trying to show weakness and try to praying might actually work, but asking for mercy from his enemies, uh, asking for them to be compassionate or to find a common moral ground with them. But no, that's not actually going to happen. They are sadistic. They want to see their enemies fail. What happened to Bolsonaro is the wet dream of all of the leftist movements everywhere. And that's the great tragedy of it, because he never tried. He could never see how awful his enemies were. Every time his supporters asked for him to take harsh actions against his enemies, he was always trying to see the better side. He was always trying to be compassionate, as most as brazen as he talked, he was actually a very reasonable guy. Uh, on the contrary, his enemies are always move talking him, say, "No, we're trying to preserve democracy for you, you evil fascist dictator." And he was like, "Me? I'm the fascist dictator? No, look how I'm letting you guys do all of these things to me. How can I be evil?" And it's just sad. At the end of the day, it is just sad because the guy basically went out without a fight. He didn't do a lot to fight back his enemies, and most of all, ended up just empowering them, empowering all the people who hated him, and disavowing a lot of people who supported him.
As you said about the Leper King, he's not only not fighting his enemies, he's fighting his supporters. There was the Magnitsky Law uh, process when even Trump got tired, got fed up because people were trying to give him a way out, and he said, "No, don't do that. Don't do anything to this judge and this judge." And his sons were upset. Trump abandoned him because he still thinks he can please people into salvation.
No, I was just gonna say that the point we're at now is the humiliation ritual to show all the enemies of the Workers' Party what happens to them when they try to, question their power, question their means. There is a quote by José Dirceu, which is, I think, president. No, he's not the president of the party, but anyway, he's very important inside of the party. Where he says basically that we are gonna get the power, which is different from winning the elections. And that's exactly what Bolsonaro does not understand. He thought that by winning the elections he would do something, but this is only the first part, and probably the easiest. given that, as we were saying, his opponents were not that popular. Because, I mean, it's the easiest because Lula was in power since 2002. So a lot of the government machine was already well oiled up, let's say, to work on their favor. And you see that with um, justice, um, Supreme Supreme Justice,
Supreme Court.
the Supreme Court, exactly. And well, every single public machine, every single public institution, all of them were against Bolsonaro. He cannot win if everything is against him. And well, he is the textbook example of what you said, of the Olavo quote that you have to do not democratic things to keep democracy going on, right? I mean, I'm not going to be too nitpicky here because I'm pretty sure all of us here are against democracy, but um, you cannot play their game because they are playing it in a much more vicious and they are more prepared. They're willing to sacrifice more than you are. And at the same time, your side is full of infights. Not that theirs isn't, but infights don't help when you are, in a bad position. When they can have the luxury of having infighting because they own everything, but Bolsonaro didn't. So a lot of the infight that happened also was a big problem. I mean, it's a very tragic thing. It's pathetic, to be honest. But it serves as an example for, I mean, if if any sort of opposition is going to form in Brazil, they have to study very carefully what happened to Bolsonaro because that's exactly what they should not do once they're in power, of course.
To try to finish some kind of white pill, if on one hand all that happened to Bolsonaro could be a warning from the left, say don't challenge us or this will happen to you. This is also a cautionary tale. This is also a lesson to any potential right wing leader say to learn. Okay, if I get to power, I need to crush them. There's no way to please these guys. They'll never be satisfied. Just getting elected is a crime they'll punish forever. So do not be a nice guy. If people can at least learn this, if someone can at least learn this, I can take something positive from the Bolsonaro phenomenon. If not, it was all in vain.
I think it was mostly in vain, to be honest. But at the same time, I don't think the left, as we know it, is gonna survive after Lula dies, which is again very pathetic, given that he needs to die to be defeated.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
that's really sad.
but I mean, at this point, I think Brazilians will take anything.
Yeah, Bolsonaro is not only a cautionary tale or a lesson to be learned just for Brazilians, and as the mission statement of this channel kind of is that we're expanding the horizons of Brazilian discussions beyond our borders. Uh, Bolsonaro is a very important case to be studied for right-wing movements everywhere because uh, they are not going to be kind to you. As the great philosopher of our age, Sam Hyde, said, the left wants you broken and your kids mutilated and whatnot. They just want to see you suffer, basically. They are not your friends. They are not your, honest, chivalrous enemies who just, want a good democratic spar and everything is going to be hunky-dory. We're going to go work together for the betterment of the country. For them, it was always a death war. We're going to bring the country down with you if you don't have our way. And it has always been that way since the inception of the left. And to expect anything on the other way, it is just madness. And to think that even liberal politics is going to solve this, it is not. It is just going to put it on brakes, or reduce the speed limit of how quickly you're going to get your society destroyed, and the actual people who are the opposition liquidated in one way or another. And this is especially important in the case of Trump, because all of the rhetoric of "we're going to kill you," or "dark MAGA," or "Trump is for real this time, trust the plan," and whatnot, is all nice and stuff. But time is a very precious thing. Momentum is a very precious thing. And these are all things Bolsonaro had. Bolsonaro had the momentum. Bolsonaro had the popular support. Bolsonaro had a country which was fed up with institutions, with its elite, with its corruptions, all things that Trump had, and even the same brazen rhetoric that Trump had. But if you don't start consolidating political power, if you don't start knocking on doors, if you don't start, replacing their guys with your guys, and basic, actual basic power politics stuff, if you're just stuck on this rhetoric loop, you're stuck in a web. In a sort of poetic way, this whole thing about getting caught in the discourse of name calling, or of this sort of artificial narratives. It is the web that traps anti-establishment movements, and Bolsonaro was very heavily caught in the web of trying to prove he's not a dictator or a fascist, and they still jailed him for it. Still jailed him for trying to be a dictator when he was not a dictator. He never tried to be, but they still jailed him anyway. And uh, and the same thing, it is important to understand for Trump, because he has the same rhetoric, he has the same momentum, he has the same kind of way of saying things, this brazen way of talking, of saying he's going to do great stuff, saying that he's going, no, this time we're going to take political power for real. But if you don't do it, your end is going to be the same as Bolsonaro, the same humiliation, the same demoralization, and the same black pilling. So, on the other hand, in other words, politics is not a game. Actually, you actually have to uh, try to win, or to try to defeat your opponents. It is contrary to what people believe about democracy. It is not a game of everybody working together for the good of the country. The left will in one day burn the country down if they're not going to have their way. And by what we are seeing so far in what's happening in American politics, it is pretty clear that that's exactly what they're going to do with all their protests going on and stuff. So if they're not going to have their way, they're going to burn the country. So playing fair is not going to work with them.
And besides the need for political action, I think the Bolsonaro's case is also a cautionary tale to against ego in politics. Because as Emerald mentioned, there was a lot of infighting, but it's almost inevitable when you have these coalitions and so on. But it can even be healthy to have infighting, but it needs to be solved. If your way of dealing with infighting is going to social media and post those snarky comments about someone in an indirect manner or something like it, and never solving the issue, you're just wasting time. Infighting is will always be present, but it needs to be solved. Call people, close doors, and and try to be reasonable and find a compromise. I see the problem we see in the age of social media is that people don't tend to do that. They tend to turn the discussion public. We see this with MAGA as well. The the MAGA Big Tent coalition will have the tech bros against the more Steve Bannon guys and the Groypers and so on, and they don't solve the issues. They simply keep attacking each other publicly, and this will never solve anything. Yeah, I don't know. We're approaching 2 hours of episode here. Maybe it's time to wrap up. But on my side, I think that's all the things I wish to talk about this topic, or most of it. Uh, yeah, it was pretty backpedaling all that process. I remember all the hope we had in 2018 and so on, and seeing all that falling apart was a tough pill to swallow. But I don't know what you guys take from it.
Yeah, we have once again failed to not black pill on an Araucast episode. But yeah, this year in Brazilian politics is election year, presidential elections years, and contrary to 2018 or even 2012, the spirits are not running high. The expectations are not very high. People are expecting the same to happen, the same corrupt elites to win, the same elites to keep being in charge of the country in the lower levels and in every levels. And it is very easy to black pill, especially when you are in a country where your ex-president is in jail for failing to actually play power politics, and being humiliated by the enemies you thought he was going to crush, but ended up just becoming fodder for their sadistic political games and whatnot. It is very easy to black pill. It's a very black pilling story, and it should be as a warning to all of those who are thinking of getting into politics or who are in politics now about what is good to spend energy on, and what is a distraction, what is counterproductive, and what's eventually going to end up with you in jail, your country being occupied by a hostile ideology, and you're not being able to do very much. So as as it is black pilling, it is I hope the black pill is useful for others, if not at least for it to be learned from its mistakes.
Well, honestly, I don't have much to say. I think you guys did a wrapped it up in a very nice way. And well, what I have to say is that politics often is something that when you pay attention too closely, you can get um, tangled up in it, and that stories such as Bolsonaro's will probably take a toll on your view of the future and stuff. So I think you either have two options if you want to be like a healthy, happy person. You can either take it with a grain of salt. I mean, politics as something that just happens, or you can take um, I wouldn't say it an ironic view of the thing, but you know, you take a step back and you try to see it like a show, like a TV show that's happening. And yeah, I don't think it's healthy to look at these things too closely while having a big emotional investment. I think that's it. Politics matter, but they're not the end all be all. And yes, this is very black pilly in general. But what can you do? Politics is very dirty.
Honestly, I actually maybe I'm being too naive, but I see something good in the horizon, but not for this year. I see even some people wishing that Lula just wins again for the fourth time, and maybe he's too senile. Maybe he doesn't have that much energy anymore, so he gives us uh, 4 more years to build an actual right wing movement. But we never know. Maybe he'll just double down and try to make things even harder and put even more controls on social media and freedom of speech and so on. So you never know. I don't like playing that game.
It's too unpredictable, right? I mean, yes, the left, the worker party's left, is kind of dominates poli- politics in general in Brazil today. It's true, but it can't be something that goes on forever. They've been doing it for 20 years, and people are, well, even if they don't take action, they're still getting aware of it. and it's not easy to maintain all of that. It's not easy to manage everything. So I don't know what may happen, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's a different. It requires a special kind of person to be hopeful when you're dealing with the long term, right? When you're looking at the guys from Covadonga, the guy from the Kingdom of Asturias, were able to reconquer all the Iberian Peninsula over centuries. Those kind of people who had this willpower to keep fighting for centuries over generations, they were different kind of people comparing to what we have today. So it's hard to be motivated, to get people motivated and say, oh, don't worry, in 10 and 20 years this will be over. It's a good chunk of your life, so maybe people will just black pill. So the biggest fight, I believe, will be to keep people hopeful and don't let them turn to cynicism about what's going on. Yeah, I'll try to white pill to some extent here, but that's pretty hard. But okay, I hope you guys. I want to thank our audience to following us throughout this episode once again. It was a pretty interesting topic to talk about because, as we said, it's a pretty good lesson for the entire world. I want to thank again the Hermit and Emerald for all their contributions. They they raised a lot of points that I was actually forgetting about, and it's always good to have them here to enrich the conversation. So thank you guys again, and that's it. Uh, Hope you have enjoyed this episode. Like and subscribe if you wish. Leave a comment, and until the next episode.